Hey, welcome back to our final series of Inhabit. We are curating media with intentionality as we move through this final formational habit. And today, specifically, our bottom line is about curating content based on the character that we want to cultivate.
Yeah, so we've already talked about how, the media that we consume is formational. Like it's going to affect what we're becoming, who we're becoming. So today really leaning into like how do we begin to curate the kinds of things that we're watching so that we're developing the kind of character that we want. And we see throughout the New Testament this idea of setting our minds on things above, and here we have a living example in the Apostle Peter, who has this high moment with Jesus where he recognizes, and is given insight from the Spirit, it seems, to recognize that Jesus is the Messiah, and then immediately after that gets called out by Jesus as, get behind me, Satan, that moment that no one wants to experience.
Low point.
And then Jesus begins to say, like, look, Peter, you've got your mind set on the wrong things. You've focused your attention on the things of this world and not on the things of God. And so
human concerns rather than heaven's plan or heaven's wisdom or the kingdom narrative.
Sure. And even though they didn't have media back then the way that we have it now, they had stories that they paid attention, that they circulated to, and so Peter clearly had been listening to a narrative that ran counter to God's narrative in this case. And so he found that out real quick with Jesus, who didn't mince any words with him, but said, like, hey, you need to be concentrated on what God's will is, on what is true and right, and not on just what's popular.
Right. So as we kind of translate that concept then to this formational habit, maybe we start to recognize how the era that we find ourselves, this cultural moment, is so unique even to certainly what Peter was living in, but maybe even what we grew up in,
It's true. Yeah, I mean, we grew up with mostly when you and I were kids, it was just TV basically, and then the internet came along, and then phones and computers and iPads, and it's multiplying out of control. It seems there's just more and more, not only devices and ways to view media, but also just outlets of media and types of media, and everything from video games that are interactive and social media that feels like interpersonal, but there's still news content and all that stuff. And it all shares a story.
Yeah, and it's a landscape that we are all learning to navigate because it is relatively new. I mean, most of the adults in our groups did not grow up with this. We're not digital natives, as we might say, but digital immigrants. We're still trying to find our way in this land. And I think even digital natives that grew up with this kind of technology and media, we're trying to figure out how to navigate all of these different portals and sources of information and storytellers, really is what it is. And remain faithful to God's concerns for this world and for our lives, our character, and not basing our actions and our relationships on human concerns.
Right.
So specifically, this idea of curating is interesting. We've been using, it's in the formational habit.
Right.
And it's worth noting this is something unique to, again, where we find ourselves today.
Yeah, that there's so much.
And it's curated. Somebody is curating your intake, right? If you're not even taking ownership of that, somebody's taking ownership of it for you, usually in large server rooms, right? Somewhere in these supercomputers with algorithms that still boggle my mind, someone is curating based on your location, your clicks, your gender, your socioeconomic status, your politics, your even who you're in proximity with, and then what they're searching and what they're looking at. That means you have friends who have similar dispositions or thoughts or thinking. We've all had the moment, right, where you are in a conversation in a room with people, and then the next time you open your news feed, the very thing you were talking about, an ad pops up for, and it's like, this is creepy.
It is.
They're always listening.
It is. And it's not just that, it's like every decision that we make informs what we're going to be offered in the future. So this is something where like your media curation can kind of snowball out of control in any direction that you go, because you watch that Netflix show and maybe it turns out like you start thinking, I don't know if I should have watched that. I don't know if I really wanted to watch that. But now what's Netflix going to do? They're going to offer you more
because
stuff.
You watched this.
Yeah.
We think you'll like this. Curation.
I mean, YouTube does it. Everybody, every source of media seems to kind of tailor things, and there's a plus side to that, obviously, but could go in a down way.
You've even pointed out like that actually, if you make good choices, could help curate more good choices, snowball in a good direction, but it could have the counter effect as well. So this would be a question mark then of, if I'm curating with intentionality, my click counts for something. My choices matter in what I'm engaging and how I'm going down a rabbit hole, or even how I'm engaging on social media feeds and what I choose to like or heart, even love, right?
All those little things end up feeding into the, how we're curating our content. And we may not even recognize that click is curating, but it is. And so that's informing the character that we're going to be developing. But not only is there this idea of maybe a caution that we're giving you of like, be careful what direction you snowball this in, but also you've pointed out before, like we can get in silos with our media too, like where we're kind of isolated and maybe have too narrow a viewpoint.
Yeah. So one of the ways that curators work, these digital curators work, is because they track us. And honestly, when we go on any kind of streaming service or social media platform, we really aren't the customer, we're actually the product, right? We are what is being mined, the data that comes out of our clicks and all of these kinds of things. So there's billions of dollars
in the
really
attention economy.
In the attention economy. There's billions of dollars at stake really to get you to come back and to click on another thing and to follow this rabbit hole and to click the because you watch this now you'll like this, right? And then selling that information to someone. So because of that, what is happening increasingly is that we become more isolated, kind of these silos. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons we're more polarized probably in our culture, because I am not exposed, unless I'm intentional about it, to someone that maybe has a different viewpoint from their viewpoint. Like I might know that other people have a different viewpoint, but it's still, the article that's populated for me is written by someone with my bias, And so again, the idea of exposing ourselves to contrary worldviews or viewpoints isn't so that we will cave or compromise, but it is perhaps so that we can understand other people better. And this kind of gets to that character I want to cultivate, right? I think of Peter writing about, what we always want to be ready as believers to give an answer for the hope that we have. But when we do it, let it be done in gentleness and respect. And the gentleness and respect piece, that's a character issue, right? That's a character I want to cultivate. And these things seem to be at a deficit in even followers of Jesus' character these days. And it's not helping the cause of Christ, seemingly in many cases, as much as hindering that. So that could be a different angle of curating media with intentionality that's more subtle or that we don't think about. It's easy to go to the cable news station of our choice based on what's comfortable and aligns with our political affiliation. It's easy to only read things that are populated that someone else has curated for us. It's easy to only watch the show that's been populated based on the show we watch for. I mean, we can just get stuck, and in so doing, we're becoming more isolated, less loving, less gentle, less thoughtful in how to engage people who hold an opposing worldview even.
Yeah, and really I think, being more thoughtful people is really the heart behind what we're trying to say here too. Is just in general with all this media stuff, let's be a little more intentional. Let's be a little bit more mindful of what we're doing instead of just mindlessly receiving what is given to us. And so, I hope that you're not hearing from us like an oppressive viewpoint or a judgmental or condemning or demonizing whatever media you're watching, but we would invite you to think about it, because not all media is created equal, and it's not all going to form the character that we want to form that's Christ-like. And so we can't answer those questions for all of you, for each of you, of what news channel you should watch or what kind of media is appropriate and what's not appropriate, but we can point you to the one who can.
Absolutely. And there is this sense, even circling back to our story today, there is no doubt that there are aspects of the story of Jesus that we get and we see it with greater clarity. And in that case, God affirms that in us. And he just wants us to fan that into flame then.
Right.
But make no mistake, he's not afraid of mincing words with his spirit in us to convict us. And I hope he doesn't say, "Get behind me, Satan." But at the same time, the caution there that he's giving is in love to Peter. To say, you have so much potential to do amazing things for the kingdom of God, but your concerns have to be anchored to God's story and God's concerns, not human concerns. And I think that can become a filter even for the way we're curating the things that we're setting our intention on.
Absolutely.